Let's perhaps start with Kjell Caminha, who is professor in art history at the Gothenburg University. And Kjell has been, I found that he was a co-editor of a report, a research report, public art researcher in the Nordic countries. And this seemed to be exactly what we were working with. So I thought it'd be great to start with a kind of overview. And Kjell has said, well, it's actually not just Nordic, it may be other tendencies, but I'll let him decide on the direct approach. But thank you very much for coming, Kjell, and sharing your research and to create this context for us. So we can see you, I think we can hear you, and you may want to share your screen and lead in.
Hi there, everyone. Hi there, everyone. I'm Kjell Caminha. I'm originally from Brazil, but based in Sweden, in Gothenburg.
Can't hear you, Kjell, unless it's just me.
I can hear me now. Can you hear me?
Yes, we're fine now, sorry.
Oh, no worries. So, hi, I'm Kjell Caminha. I'm originally from Brazil, but based in Gothenburg since 2005. And I'm an artist, so I'm a practitioner. There was a bit of a change in terms of professing art history. I'm not a professor, hopefully not yet, but yeah, perhaps someday. So I'm a lecturer in fine art and craft at University of Gothenburg, Sweden. And well, it's great. First, thanks for being here. It's great to be to have the luxury to be exposed to so many local and specific perspectives that I wasn't aware of. So this is great. Even in the Nordic context, there are a lot of new names and new perspectives that I hadn't heard of. So so this is really a privilege. I work specifically with focus on the development of curatorial strategies, artists working with curatorial strategies as means for furthering the colonial dialogue. And that informs a lot of my pedagogical work and artistic research and practice. So I'm speaking from that perspective. I hope you guys are seeing my screen, my presentation, right? Just
yes, fine.
So yes, so I'll try to condense this really short time but useful time to summarize the findings of this report on research on the current. It was 2018, but the current then research of public art, both in Nordic and a wide international context, that I co-authored with Professor Mick Wilson, Oscar Svanelid, and Professor Håkan Nilsson. And then I'll try to outline some ideas and necessities on a curatorial practice in regards to curating public and commissioning public art that we cultivate in an international course that are run at University of Gothenburg for curators, commissioners, artists as well, and even community leaders that want to be involved in curating and commissioning public art. So I'm trying to make two things out of one. So bear with me. So you can see in the screen, basically that was the brief. We were asked by Statens Konstråd, the public art agency, to develop a report, to write a report on the current state of research on public art in the Nordic countries and in a wider international context. The idea is that it will provide an overview of the current state of research on public art, and with the key purpose of, the idea was to identify where were the needs and opportunities for further development of a research program to support other development of public art paradigms, policies, and practice within Sweden. So it was also this idea of like, can we look at the research and see where we should put our resources on? I'm talking about public resources in the Swedish context. So that was the kind of a brief and what we intended to do. And this was done over a summer. So it was, or across summer, let's say 3 or 4 full months for the 4 of us. So it was in short, a very squeezed in time, but to see what was there. So what we did was already in the beginning, we had this difficulty of like, okay, can we define public art? How define public art? Public art is such a vast term. So commonly used to broadly designate artist works that have been realized for the public realm, but also this opens the question of public realm. What does it mean? Official, unofficial. This also including work that are ephemeral, work that are durational. This perspective on temporary was also there versus permanent. There was this wide range in the internal temporality of a given work. It's something that's only episodic, it's something that's accumulative, and so on and so forth. What about the visibility of this public artwork and the process? And also a wide range in spatial qualities, site-specific, mobile, dispersed, fixed in place, place defining, the so-called place making versus place listing, digital, virtual, and so on and so forth. What we did, this is very important to emphasize, with the time that we have, with the limitations of language, I can understand, my mother tongue is Portuguese, I understand Spanish, English and Swedish, but I cannot, I don't understand Finnish or Icelandic, for instance. So from a Nordic perspective, we weren't able to actually go into that specific geographic, if you may. And also with the time being, we had to make a selection of, okay, let's look at abstracts mainly of master's and PhD dissertations. So that was in core what we did as 90% of the stuff that we looked at. The other 10%, let's say, it was really projected into art projects, public art projects that we knew already from the beginning, and that we suspected there was an idea of research inquiry in their ethos. So we also projected based on the know-how of the networks we possess. So you can see this different strands of the research. So like I said, the Nordic context, the limit by the scope of the field, the definition research based on some textual presentation, academic publications. Like I said, we mainly looked at the academic publications. And the other one, I'm actually have talked about it already. So a range of academic and professional journals, landmark conferences, books, and anthologies. That's part of the stuff that we knew already in terms of the wider international context. It's also important to emphasize that this different approach from the wider international context. Me and Mick Wilson was taking part in this bit of the wider international context. We choose to push and to select already some of those because also, in terms of Nordic, there's a limitation of what's produced here. I'm talking about quantity as well. From a wide international context, it's a lot more production in terms of not quality, but quantity wise. So the difference shouldn't be overstated. It was more to have, okay, can we make a sample out of what's out there, what's reachable? But again, bear in mind that as a disclaimer, we have not covered everything, as I stated before. So I'm gonna jump a bit to the conclusions. This report, I'm gonna share the PDF right after I finish this presentation, and you can actually read and look at specific cases and how we structure it. But in terms of conclusions from the Nordic context, participation as an important topic in temporary interventions in the public realm, that was quite relevant. There was a lot of research on participation or public engagement, let's say. There was a lot of discussions about how art can inform and produce heterogeneity, be it commissioned or unsolicited. So how art actually produces diversity, or heterogeneity is actually a broader, complex word for that matter. There were also a lot of critical voices that pointed to this problem of day-to-day problem of instrumentalization of such participatory practice. There was also discussions about the role of the artist. What was the role of the artist here and there? What is it? Facilitator of openness discussions? It's a vehicle, another vehicle for identification, or a victim of this larger scheme. So there was quite great examples of such. It also shows that there was a field that engaged artistic researchers, both as active agents, where the research partly is temporary invention, and as a way of discussing the possibilities of future public art. So in short, a lot of practice-led approaches. There was also this perspective that was quite relevant in terms of how the public sphere is changing. It has possibilities of change through the process of public art production or development. Art that was discussed as an instrument to keep the public, something that's reinvented rather than preserved. I mean, the public and the public realms. There was also this peculiar perspective on what could be the bearings of ideas on post-national state in relation to commission public art. What's the implication in relation to the state commissioning public art? Notion of a public sphere in relationship to the digital realm. Public realm becoming more and more hybridized through digital media, technology, and various platforms it produces, as we have heard about the digital impact and have experienced the last more accurately than the last 6-7 months. Well, I'm looking at the time, so I think I have to run, but basically in terms of concluding ideas from the wider international context, there was this overly fetishization, if you may, about the case study. The case study is the common research instrument for evidence. Everything is like case study based. Not that this is a problem, but there's other alternatives, I believe. There are more, I don't know, inter-transitional. There's this tendency to prioritize the perspectives of the producers of public art. And here, I think it's interesting to consider this aspect of participation, and I'll talk more about it in short. But basically, there's a lot of like, okay, public art and participation, a lot of emphasis on participation with the public, but this participation that comes when the artist has arrived and then it's time to invite the public, not the other way around. What if we had the public or publics involved in the beginning of the commissioning public art schemes? So that's something that was, at least for me, that it's quite interesting on the matter, a very relevant lack of. Not that the research doesn't exist, but it wasn't so evident, let's say. There was also this perspective of there are different national, international comparative studies. They are not being shared amongst each other. And the idea of we being here, it's an example of this, like promoting this sharing. So a opportunity to empirically map and catalog different ways in which art and architectural commissions, for instance, have been implemented and experienced by different stakeholders. Also the divide or dichotomy, if you may, public art in urban rural development context. There's some meta level analysis that could be pushed, could be encouraged to go that way. So yes, as I also, this is important, potential role of public art works constructed as research practices in their own right. So it's, let's emphasize this, because and also this shows one of the problems with this very short overview of research. Since we were paying attention on academic outputs, let's say, there are a lot of public art works, there are research practice in their own right that don't end up as an output in the academic context. I mentioned this before, more work in terms of possible strategies for working with publics. So this idea of what could be a community-led commissioning process rather than a community-rich participation public artwork, or in other alternative forms for schemes. The percent for art paradigm, if you may, was also something that was relevant that we find in the research, but it's still, the way how we twist the percent for art, or how can we look at all the perspectives on using the percent for art schemes, is not so predominant in research. So yeah, so there were a multiplicity of approaches, evidence of this rich potential of public art as a space of knowledge work. We proposed that there should be one simple overarching research agenda, but rather the need of heterogeneity to be addressed through different strategies. And this perspective on constructing national data sets so they could be shared. So one thing that we, of course, research feeds teaching, feeds pedagogical impulses. And one thing that we do at Volon, I run this course on commissioning, creating contemporary public art, and which is a distance course, advanced level. It focuses on to critically analyze how commissioning, creating of contemporary processes are organized or could be redeveloped, and how we might understand ideas on publicness on this space for the senses out there, but also inside the living room and so on and so forth. It's not really the private and versus the public, but rather how the social is constructed, if I could be more direct. And how we can promote this idea that art creates public. So this is, the research it's something that we brought to the course. And I mentioned also that I would talk about a little bit of the course because it shows a little some sort of the lack or indication of what students that are already professionals in the field are struggling with. And this is a course that's been run since 2017. More or less 40% of the students are based on the Nordic context and already are embedded in the public sector, involved in creating commissioning processes. This is a free to EU national course, so we have this good opportunity to have other people outside of Nordic context, and they constitute like a whole part of the course as well. So students show that they have this request of getting to know how to slow down the urban development processes that involve commissionings, understand more how mapping agency could be within their respective processes, what could be strategies or methodologies into conducting curatorial inquiries while commissioning with public funds. So this kind of a dilemma. Seeking vocabularies also for common understanding with urban developers, bureaucrats, and publics as a wide concept. And I just gonna hit this question: should citizens be able to commission public works? As something that we promote as an inquiry into the course. And I think there's, from the Swedish part, I think there's a great example, a potential great example to be for conversation. And this is the Konsthänder, or Arts Happening. Magdalena Malm mentioned it very briefly, but this was a initiative from the Swedish government that in 2015 decided to promote art production in milieu program areas. And the idea was to involve direct civic engagement in production of art. And this is my translation of this. What you see on the right is in Swedish, but it's a letter, it's a mandate letter saying that, in short, it tells how this initiative should go about. So one bit that I think is quite interesting is the aim with the initiative is to create good premises for increased influence, participation, and offer for artistic gestalt in certain chosen residential arenas, milieu program. It should reach all age groups, and it's also an investment for increased democratic participation. As such, it should be directed to areas with low election participation. So I think it's also important to say that during this time, this was 2015, and one year after the far-right party or parties acquire more power in the Swedish parliament. So I argue that there is a direct reflection on that political framework. So you can see that I dare to say that's money from the social that goes to, or money for art that goes to the social instead of the traditional other way around. So Swedish Public Art Agency was the one responsible to translate this initiative towards practice. And they, in short, they come up with this open call asking civil society actors such as NGOs, ethnic, housing, gardens, sports, artists, social associations, private and other institutions that do not take part in the public sector, or even youth, parent, or senior groups to apply. And the application is describe a situation that you might want to do something about it, something that might change through an artwork or artistic process. So this is a direct example, be controversial as it can be, of being forced perhaps to ask the citizens and even denizens, if you may, to propose ideas, propose processes, situations that artworks can go and then alter. So it's an interesting set of dilemmas. In short, there was 153 applications, 15 applications were granted, 19 artworks were produced. And so yeah, my point in I'm not gonna be able to talk about this in depth, but my point in talking about in bringing this project to the core, to the conversations, because even if it's as controversial, because it deals with this different sets of, okay, instrumentalization, macro, micro, meso compromises of such, it does push the agency that's been doing a work that wasn't similar to this since 1937. So as Magdalena Malm was talking about, it forces them to become mediators, to think about people that work as a co-curator, and so on and so forth. So I think there's some potentiality in it, into looking at, for instance, this and other projects such as more referential ones in terms of alternative schemes, as the new patrons.
2 minutes.
Great. The Les Nouveaux Commandataires, the new patrons in France. A titolo, it's a similar idea in Italy, Concomitantes in Spain, as different perspectives into this alternative community-led commissioning, public art commissioning scheme. And that's my kind of a slight short provocation in terms of, I know that I'm an artist, we tend to look at artistic practice in terms of interventions, but I think it bears also to pay attention, it requires also to pay attention how we think about commissioning before the artist might arrive. So yes, I think I'm done. This is just a small plug for the course, since it's open still, the applications, and it's again free to nationals. We had Greek, Danish, Norwegian students, and it's always great to bring up these different urges of the public realms in terms of commissioning and creating public art. And Magdalena also mentioned this Parklick artwork from the artist Kerstin Bergendahl, which happens to be the teacher. This is a book that if you want to know more in terms of Scandinavian, the social Scandinavian turn, I do recommend that. Thanks a lot. Sorry for stretching a bit.
That's fine, Kjell. That's good. And it's good to do a bit of plugging, I'm sure. And this is really interesting, this question of who commissions, how to commission, and which position the artists take in this, and what is also the role of the curator. And actually, we perhaps should not call the person a curator. Maybe it's a mediator. And there are many different terms used for this, which is an interesting thing. So in this landscape, which needs to be readdressed and needs to be rethought through, actually, in this time, we'll come back to that, I'm sure, and I'm sure all the artists who are now going to speak have a meaning about that, and about how they feel themselves in this complex these scenarios between cities, between citizens, and between concrete tasks and expectations of the deliverables, and also the freedom to want to engage as an artist.